If you ever feel like your self-worth is tied to your creative successes or failures, this episode is for you. But first, let me tell you about my coffee. I make really good espresso. It's true. I don't usually go around bragging about it, and I don't think it's the best espresso in the world or even in Iceland, but it's pretty good. I'm happy with it. However, I didn't roast the beans. That's pretty crucial to have good beans. And I didn't build the espresso machine either. That's a pretty important thing to have a good machine. I didn't design my own single dose grinder. I didn't even invent the little needle thing that I use to stir the grounds to prevent channeling. Which reminds me, I'm not even the person that identified channeling as a key obstacle to making great espresso. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Our creative successes are never solely our own. But before we really get going here, if you're enjoying the video, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And go ahead and subscribe while you're at it. If you're new here, welcome to Keep the Flow. I'm Scott McLemore, a drummer and composer living way up north in Iceland. I make these episodes every week to look under the hood of the creative process and to keep our creative engines humming. In any creative pursuit, we're not solely responsible for the outcome. If I play a great drum solo, of course I'm going to feel good about it, but a long list of drummers before me had some part in that. There are also the people who told me to listen to those drummers, and the teachers that helped me refine my technique. Not to mention the artisans in Turkey who hammered out my cymbals, and the craftsmen in Germany who designed and built my drum set in the 70s. Of course, I deserve some credit too, but we're all building on what's come before us, and we've all been helped along the way. When it comes to espresso, it's a complicated thing if you really get into it. Things have to be done just right to get the desired result. You have to have decent gear, but you also have to know how to use it. So it's not as if I'm manifesting great espresso because I'm just gifted at it. There's so much that goes into it, and I'm just nerdy enough to put the time in to research and experiment with it. And it's the same thing with the drums. It takes time and work to get good at it, but it also takes inspiration from others. It takes collaborating with other musicians and great audiences, and having a good instrument helps too. I'm bringing this up because it's easy to find ourselves on the ego roller coaster. Or how about ego coaster? Ego coaster, yeah. That's trademarked, by the way. On the ego coaster, we go up when we have successes and down when we fail. When our ego is attached to our creative pursuits, it can lead to all sorts of problems. So today I want to get into the creative's ego. How important is it, and how can we keep it in check? Let's get started. Creative confidence is a term that I think was coined by David and Tom Kelly. They actually wrote a book with that as the title, which I highly recommend to creative people or people who think they're not creative, especially to people who think they're not creative. Anyway, the idea of creative confidence is so important to those of us in the business of coming up with and executing ideas on a daily basis. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to trust that we have the ability to come up with solutions to whatever we're working on. We have to assume that we have the goods. Otherwise, why would we try? If we assume that we'll probably fail at whatever we're working on, it's hard to justify working on it. If we think we're wasting our time, or if we feel like our efforts are futile, why do it? In the book, they bring up the work of psychologist Carol Dweck, who wrote another book called Mindset. She breaks down the way that people generally see the world into two camps: fixed mindset and growth mindset. Fixed mindset people see the world from the perspective of predetermined ability. Effort is a sign of weakness because if they were good enough, it would be easy. Growth mindset people see the world as an opportunity for endless growth. Effort is seen as a sign of progress and a desire to learn. Failure to the fixed mindset person is devastating, whereas the growth mindset person sees that as a natural part of the process of learning. Confidence for the fixed mindset person is fragile. One failure can upend their motivation and send them reeling. But the growth mindset person, when faced with failure, is confident in their ability to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep improving, to adapt their skills to overcome setbacks. Of the two, I gotta say, the growth mindset has sounded pretty good. So how does ego relate to these two mindsets? For a fixed mindset person, their ego is all in on whatever they're doing. If they succeed, they're on top of the world. Their ego is in full bloom. If they fail, their ego sneaks off to some alley to hide behind a dumpster with a bottle of Jack Daniels. Although people with a growth mindset also have egos, it's just that their egos aren't as invested in whatever they're currently doing. But this translates into growth mindset people being more willing to take risks, to try things, to experiment. The fixed mindset person is looking at way more downside if things go south, so they're more likely to play it safe and stick with what they know. A lot of times this has to do with external versus internal motivation. Are we engaged in creativity for some external validation, or by an internal desire to express something or be of use or learn or get better? When we come back, we'll get into ways to cultivate a growth mindset and a healthy relationship with our ego. It's Bring Your Ego to Work Day here at Keep the Flow. How are we doing? Everything okay? Good to hear. What's that? You're gonna hit the thumbs up and subscribe? Awesome. Thanks. I can't actually hear you, but I thought it would be polite to ask how you're doing. I hope you're doing well. However, speaking of things we can all hear, Audible. That's right, Audible actually means something that we can hear, but it's also the name of Amazon's audiobook company. Learn something new every day. This is something that I use all the time. Right now I'm listening to Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up, and I'm absolutely loving it. He reads it himself, which is really nice. A lot of younger people who know him as an actor don't realize that he was once the top stand-up comedian in the world. He had this amazing career and then one day he just walked away from it. I also want to watch the documentary that just came out about him. I'm a fan, if that wasn't obvious before. I still read physical books, but I gave audiobooks a shot a couple years ago, and I realized how great it was to be able to listen to books while I'm driving or walking Penny or just chilling at home. Right now, Audible is offering a 30-day free trial, so go click the affiliate link in the show notes, or you can just go to audible.scottmclemore.com. And now, back to Keep the Flow. Alright, now that we've identified the basic problem, what can we do about it? Here are 5 ways we can untether our ego from our creative work. Going back to the examples at the beginning, I talked about how I would feel if I played a great drum solo. Keeping in mind the fact that I owe a lot to other drummers, teachers, and things that have inspired me along the way, some of which I might not even be aware of. But what if I played a bad drum solo? What if I was completely uninspired and just couldn't get anything happening? It happens sometimes. I'm a human being. It's a bummer. But do I deserve all the blame? Of course. I'm gonna take responsibility for how I perform. I'm not gonna make excuses. But if I don't deserve all the credit for when I play a good solo, why do I deserve all the blame when I play a bad solo? However, what if we step back and instead of trying to figure out who deserves credit or blame, just accept the performance for what it was? This is number 1, practicing non-judgment. If we extract ourselves from the whole equation, we can just move on. Instead of judging one way or another, just appreciate the moment, the opportunity to learn, the connection. This brings us to number 2, practicing gratitude. Whether we feel good or bad about our work, we can still feel grateful for the opportunity to do it Practicing gratitude is a big part of moving ourselves into the growth mindset column. Seeing each task or project as an opportunity for growth and being thankful for that will lessen the pressure we feel to succeed, or at least not fail, and will wean our ego off of the need for praise. And look, there are going to be projects that we don't want to do, that we shouldn't do, because they're not right for us. But if we find ourselves in a situation that we wish we had said no to, we can still be grateful because we're learning where to put our boundaries. If we never had any bad experiences, we wouldn't know what to avoid. Number 3 is celebrate the process. When I sit down to write music or practice the drums, I try to remember to give myself a pat on the back, figuratively. I don't physically reach around and pat myself on the back. But I try to remember to say something nice to myself, like, all right, making it happen, or good on you. Should I try that in Australian accent? Good on you. I can't do that. Good on you. Did they say that? Good on you, mate. I have no idea. The thought is what's really important. Whether or not I actually wrote something usable or if I feel like I made progress on the drums, this has to be independent of that. It's not results-based. By doing this, we're conditioning ourselves to appreciate the process, and we're making the result seem less important. Of course, we all want results, but it has to become more of an assumption that eventually we will have something to show. The result is only a byproduct of the process, and the more we value the process, the more results we will eventually have. Number 4, can you see that? Number 4 is embrace your inner amateur. The word amateur comes from the Latin amator, which means lover. So when we do something out of love, we're amateurs. No matter how skilled or professional we become, we never want to lose that amateur passion. We need to keep coming back to the reason we started doing this in the first place. The amateur wants to learn. They enjoy learning because the ego is not trying to claim expertise. And finally, number 5 is to create to serve. Getting compliments can feel really good. It can also be awkward, but hearing how something we made enriched someone else's life, that's another thing altogether. The feeling of being useful and appreciated is much nicer than feeling like a badass. I love the quote from the playwright George Bernard Shaw that I've mentioned before. He's talking about his motivation in life, and in one part of the quote he says, "I want to be thoroughly used up when I die." End quote. His motivation, his reason for creating, was always in service to others. When we stop looking for praise, stop trying to impress, stop feeling inferior or superior, and instead focus on what we can give to people. What can we create that could make things better for someone else? How can our work be part of the solution for others? When we think like that, our ego is not hiding in the alley with Jack Daniels. It's sitting on a tropical beach somewhere, sipping a mojito. It's a much better place to be, and it's a much better drink. Our ego is chilled out when we're being of service. It becomes untethered to the results, and instead it's all in on the process. The effort we're putting in is good, and as long as we're engaged in the effort, our ego is just working on its tan. So in closing, I want to mention that the ego in and of itself is not a bad thing. We need the ego. It's what gives us a sense of identity. The philosopher Alan Watts said, I have to check my notes now. The philosopher Alan Watts said that without the ego, the thinker would be no more than the series of thoughts, and the feeler no more than the feelings. I'm paraphrasing, but the point is, our ego defines our relationship with the world. It's important, but it can trick itself into thinking it's more important than it actually is. If we practice non-judgment and gratitude, celebrate the process, embrace our inner amateur, and create from a position of service, we can adopt more of a growth mindset, develop creative confidence, and hop off the ego coaster. That's all I've got for today. Thanks so much for hanging out. Please take a moment to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. My ego thanks you in advance. And stop on my Patreon page to get early access to podcast episodes, bonus content, and catch up on my new series, Hiking with Penny. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep the flow. Good on ya. Good on ya. Good on ya. Good on ya.